Poland's parliament has passed a law adapting Polish law to the EU Digital Services Regulation. There is growing public concern that the new regulations may significantly restrict freedom of speech and online criticism of the government. Who will decide which posts will be removed? Officials, specifically the President of the Office of Electronic Communications, who is appointed by the government. If the bill is passed in its current form, the appeal process will be complicated, and restoring an unjustly deleted post could take years. The bill will now go to the Senate, and in order to come into force, it must then be signed by the President. Is freedom of speech dying before our very eyes in Poland? At its last session, the Sejm adopted an amendment to the Act on the Provision of Electronic Services, which is intended to bring the Polish legal system into line with the EU Digital Services Regulation. Critics of the bill point out that the government wants to use this law to introduce censorship on the internet. These are people who are afraid of debate, afraid of criticism, afraid of the existence of independent media, and at the same time afraid that people might express their opinions about them on the internet. Supervision of the application of the regulations will be exercised by the President of the Office of Electronic Communications, who is appointed by the government. Will the office become an Orwellian Ministry of Truth?
W momencie, w którym to
When an
urzędnik
official
państwowy będzie
decides
mógł
what content
decydować,
to remove and
jakie
what
treści
content not
usuwać,
to
jakich
remove,
treści nie usuwać,
unfortunately, the public has a right to be afraid that it will not be treated equally, that left-wing content will be allowed on the internet, but right-wing dissident content will not. The bill provides for the creation of a catalogue of 27 acts for which officials will be able to issue decisions to block content on the internet. If this applies to content such as human trafficking, mafias and other various crimes typically covered by the criminal code, typically involving the use of violence, I have no problem with that. The opposition points out that the problem is that the extension of the scope of restrictions to other categories, including so-called hate speech, a euphemism used broadly by authoritarian regimes to denote political dissent. The statutory catalogue also raises objections from the National Broadcasting Council, which is demanding its revision.
Cały czas podkreślamy
We
dbałość o
constantly
interesy
emphasize
odbiorców,
our concern
dbałość
to
o
the
tą
interests of
wolność
viewers and
słowa,
freedom of
ale
speech,
też
but we cannot
nie może
censor
być
public
mowy o
debate
tym,
under the guise
abyśmy
of
my
combating
pod
illegal
płaszczykiem
content.
walki
każda próba
Any
krytyki
attempt to criticize mass
migracji tak, z
immigration, for
zewnątrz będzie
example, will be
podciągana właśnie
classified,
pod
for
na przykład
example,
nienawiść na
as
tle
ethnic or racial
narodowościowym.
hatred. In the event of unjustified removal of content from the internet, there will be a right of appeal directly to the court. The National Broadcasting Council points out that the procedure should be understandable and transparent, and that the whole process be efficient and quick. Courts do not guarantee this.
Nie może być mowy o tym, że
We cannot be
znów
certain
przy
that content will be
interpretacji
blocked due to the interpretation of
przepisów
the
pewne
regulations, which
treści
in
będą
reality would mean
blokowane,
waiting several
które
years for this content,
tak
these
naprawdę w tej
platforms,
chwili
these
trzeba by
sites
było
to be
czekać
unblocked.
kilka.
Since the beginning of its term, the ruling coalition, led by Prime Minister Donald Tusk, has emphasized that it wants to control strictly content on the internet. The bill, which has passed through Parliament, will now go to the Senate. Will the internet soon cease to be an oasis of free speech for Polish citizens? Only time will tell.